video, we're going to look at Maya's UI. We're also going to look at the outliner. We're going to look at how to set up the grid, Maya movement, so how to navigate inside of Maya, snapping tools, and the different selection tools that you can have to select different polygon primitives. So let's get started. So this might be the first time you guys have ever opened up Maya, so it might be a little bit confusing. In this module, we won't really be using everything that Maya has to offer. So we won't be looking at like rigging or animation, but it's a tool for the whole creation of 3D. So a lot of this stuff, you may use a lot of it, you might not. If you're doing real-time stuff, you won't be using their rendering, but if you're doing offline rendering, you might use Arnold, or you might use some of the rendering tools inside of it. There's also one other program that we use is Pixar's RenderMan, which plugs directly inside of Maya. So this is the standard layout for Maya. Now you can change it depending on however used to you get to using Maya. So if we just click back to Maya Classic, just reset this. There we go. Okay, this is probably the standard that you're seeing. So you're seeing the animation timeline here. You're also seeing the perspective view of the workspace here. And you've probably seen this channel box layer editor. And every menu that you're going to ever need is going to be up here. So every tool is under one of these drop-down menus here. And if you click on the square, it brings up more options for that tool. So if we ever need them, they're all up here. We also have our own custom shelves. So this is the Polygon Shelf. So this is where all the primitives are stored, all your most used tools, your UVs, editing software, and then you can also add your own tools onto this here. So I'll show you how to do that so we can thingy. So one thing I always have, you can see here, is delete construction history, center the pivot, freeze the transformations, and export selection. These are really important because when you're modeling, you build a layer of history, which I'll show in a minute, but we need to delete it. So the best way to do this is if I just quickly get rid of those. So I'm right clicking and then just deleting. So if you accidentally put something on there that you don't. So I'm going to go to Edit, Delete by Type, and you can see History, and I'm going to press Control Shift left click. That allows me to put a new tool, this tool, on to this shelf. So I'm going to do the same here. So freeze transformations. So I'm going to go into Modify, Control Shift left click. I'm going to do the same with center pivot. And then I'm just going to do that with export selection as well. Okay, these two you probably won't have. These are plugins that I use specifically, and in a later video I'll go over these plugins for you. So let's have a look at this. So File, in this we have everything that you would see in a file folder. So new scene, open scene, save scene, as, increment. We can set up an increment, save. Now one thing I want to do is I want to set a project. Now this is where all your files for this project is going to be set. So if I go to project window, okay, I can create a new default saving area for this. So I'm going to call this my first Maya project, because that's original. And I'm going to navigate to where I want to save it. So I'm actually going to save it onto my hard drive. If you've got an external hard drive, I'd save it onto here. And I'm just going to select that directory. So it's going to create a new folder there. And it's going to give you these folders. Now the reason why this is really important is because you can start to save texture files, Maya files, FBXs, all sorts of different data inside of these folders, and Maya will then recognize that this is a folder structure that you need to use. So if I click accept, okay, now if I go File, Save Scene As, it's now going to save my scene directly into my first Maya project. Okay, I'm going to call this example Maya. Okay, and click, and I'm going to save it as an ASCII. I find you can either save it as a binary, an MB, or an MA. Me personally, through experience, ASCII is a lot less likely to corrupt. So I always save it as an ASCII. Okay, keep all the whatever's ticked on, and you don't need to change anything here. Click Save As. Now, because we're using a student version, it's going to come up with this. If you're using a professional version, you wouldn't have this. Okay, you can actually use, Maya's quite expensive for the full package, but there is a Maya Lite, which is really good, and I use that for my company work or any freelance work that I do. It's about £30 a month, and it's a good tool for games. And so now we've got this, we've saved everything, so you can see it's coming up here. My first Maya project scenes example Maya. Okay. Now, one thing I would do to begin with, just to make sure that we've got everything set up correctly, is if we go to this this cog and a running man, I always say it's the man's being chased by a giant cog. It makes people laugh. I'm going to click on here now. We're not going to do anything with this, with the time slider, which is this thing here, which is the animation. But just as a heads up, it's situated in this preference menu, and you can change the playback speed. So real time is what I always set it to. So if we just go up to settings, making sure y-axis is up, yep. We're working in centimeters, the angular is degrees, and film is 24 frames, and click save. Just means that if we start to work inside of Unreal or Unity, we've got the correct scale. Now, your grid probably doesn't look like this, it probably looks like this. So most of the tools you can reset, and if you open up the options, you can go reset tool, and you will. Just click apply. That's what your grid probably looks like. But the problem with this is it's too small. So what we're going to do is we're just going to set this up now. I use Unreal 4 scale. The reason for that is because a lot of the stuff that I do outside of teaching is working with Unreal 4 engine, so I tend to just keep my units the same. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go 1000, 110. What that's going to do is going to give us a bigger grid to work with, but it's also going to make sure that if we ever do take any of this stuff into Unreal or Unity, it's going to snap to the grid correctly. Okay. In the next video, we're going to carry on looking at the Maya UI, so I'll see you in the next video.